Welcome to Diva on a Mission podcast, where we share snippets of joy to uplift, inspire, and motivate you. I'm your host, Eva the Diva, and I'm thrilled to bring you stories that transform everyday moments into profound experiences. In this podcast episode, I want to share, some perspectives on crown and commerce, and this is about beauty trends, and especially beauty trends as they are expressed by African women and the impact of that to our economy and as business and as a way of being. So I was just thinking about the history of our hair and our beauty regimens. The history of it and how it has evolved over time. And I was wondering about how colonial ideas have reshaped what African women see as beautiful, how wigs and chemical treatments grew into an industry, and the real money involved, and how we can reclaim our crowns spiritually, creatively, and financially. So, to start, I wanted to look at, I was thinking about, kind of the impact of that on our health. And I was thinking about the things that have been lost when we look at the oils we use, the traditions that were shared between, parent to child or grandmother to child in respects to beauty, in our rituals for marriage, in our rituals for growing through the different age groups, right? Because I know some of these things were made illegal while we were going through colonialism. Before, once upon a time, before European colonial schools, before a mission house grooming standards, hair in many African cultures was a living archive. It's identified you, give you status, was a part of rite of passage, was artistic. Hairstyle signaled clan, age, marriageability, and even political alliances. The act of hair care itself was communal. Women braided one another, told stories through hair, and that creative ritual reinforced pride and belonging. Then colonial institutions, media, missionaries began to prize Eurocentric hair and beauty standards. The straight hair, certain facial features, and lighter skin. Those standards didn't just change fashion. They rewired how many African women saw themselves. This came up also as I was saying that in Jamaica, was it last week? There was a school that was closed or that was trending in the headlines because they had banned edge control gel. And there was a minister in Jamaica that was talking about it, and that's how it came across my timeline. I think it was either on TikTok or on Instagram. And in Nigeria, I think was it Nigeria or Ghana, it came up as social commentary where in most high schools, women are forced to shave their hair. And it's a practice that started during colonialism and that is still in practice today. So women end up not learning how to manage their hair because it is an option removed from their life, especially when you're going to high school, because it is seen as a distraction from what they need to focus on, which is their education. I remember when I was in high school, we were limited in the hairstyles we could have when you're going to school. You could only hold your hair going backwards in a ponytail. You could not have anything ostentatious or flashy or too creative in your hair. And if you did, like for example, color your hair or style it outside of the rules, the administration would shave your hair. to force you to comply to the rules, right? And I believe these rules are handed down from colonial times. So when we are so limited and constricted in our expression, especially with hair, when we come out of it, I feel like there's sometimes an overcompensation, or sometimes there's a way of expressing that is not necessarily rooted in self-confidence. We end up emulating others and not necessarily coming up with styles that reflect our personal philosophies, our personal creative style, and we end up emulating what is commonly out there in the media. So, in the decades that followed colonialism, an industry grew to meet the new standards, which is wigs, weaves, extensions, and chemical straighteners. They promise conformity, especially because also of the workforce. There's convenience, and then there's social acceptance. And these things sell at scale. When you have dreadlocks like I do, most times I will be told they look better when I braided them into something like a beehive so that they're not seen as wild. So when I leave my hair out and it is in its like raw, like unmanageable state, when it's loose hanging and is not styled and my edges are out and not neatened, I am not complimented. I am complimented when, my hair is freshly done, my edges are laid, and the wildness has been taken out of it, right? So I was trying to get a glimpse of the numbers, right? A widely cited estimate says that African women spend up to 7 billion every year on wigs, braids, weaves, hair extensions, and related products. At the same time, broader cosmetics and hair markets focused on Black and African hair care are sizable and growing. So I was looking for some context, some context globally, and this market is estimated to be in the billions, right? And Africa's cosmetics market was estimated to be several billion USD, and it is growing. What does that mean per woman? I was trying to get some transparent math. So we don't have precise per woman figures published continent-wide. So here's an approximate way to understand the scale. Africa's population in 2024 is roughly 1.5 billion. About half of those are female, so about 747 million women. And if we conservatively estimate that 65% of females are adults who participate mostly in the beauty economy, we have about 486 million adult women, right? That's the size of the market that we are looking at. And they spend about 7 billion annually on hair imports, wigs, relaxers, and related hair products. Divide that by 486 million women and you get an average of about $14 to $15 per woman. And that's an average. This is per year, and this is continent-wide. This is a rough average. I know, especially in Kenya, when there was a trend a couple of months back where women were looking at how much they spend roughly every 2 or 3 months on beauty and maintenance. They were talking about an average of 20 to 30,000 Kenya shillings. And this was, it became a trend. It trended because most people didn't believe it was that expensive. But even if you are trying to be conservative and bring that down to half the amount, say at 15,000 Kenya shillings a month. That is still a lot of money that is going to manufacturers who are most likely not African, who are most likely not based on the continent, and the portion of the business that is owned by African women or based in Africa is less than half when we're being generous. So let's look at the $15 billion a year on average. But remember, averages hide huge variations, right? So most women or households spend much more, especially in urban centers and among working professionals. So this is just the financial implication. Then there's the hidden health and economic burdens. It's not just dollars in the salon. There are health and social costs that are only now being widely documented. Chemical straighteners, relaxers are a major epidemiologic, are a major thing in our society today. There's a study published in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute that summarized the National Institute of Health's numbers that found that frequent use of chemical hair straightening products was associated with more than double the risk of uterine cancer compared with people who had never used chemicals. The study followed tens of thousands of women over nearly 11 years, right? And they were showing that there were long-term health costs for regular users. For skin lightening, bleaching products, there was documentation that many skin lightening products contain harmful ingredients, topical corticosteroids, and mercury derivatives that can cause systemic illnesses and serious skin damage. In some studies, so for example, these were studies for Senegal, the financial burden of skin lightening on household was measured as a very large share of income. In that study, a sample of users spent the equivalent of nearly 19% of household income on skin lightening products, right? Senegal was the most dramatic, but when you look at those numbers from a health and a financial perspective, those numbers are really, really worrying. What about the total healthcare cost? There is currently no robust continent-wide estimate of the total healthcare costs for beauty-related illnesses, that's like cancers related to relaxers, or systemic toxicity from bleaching agents, scalp infections, or from unsafe practices. There are rising legal claims and increasing regulatory attention being paid to this, especially in the US and even in Africa, but the full economic burden that is hospital costs, lost productivity, long-term care, is still poorly quantified and urgently needs research. So, all of these things are outside of us. How can we reclaim this power back? So, creatively, I want to encourage people to not be swayed by trends and instead try to personally experiment and reflect on what they want to look like and find ways to make that happen, especially to relieve both emotional and financial drain, the health, emotional and financial drain. So I wanted to offer 5 concrete pathways women can take to reclaim our crowns and our commerce, right? So option number 1 is to reclaim these rituals with your friends, with your children, with your parents, right? Bring creativity home. Learn and teach traditional braiding, beadwork, head wraps, and oil blends using local botanicals. When you do that, hair becomes a cultural ritual again. right? Financially reframe budget, invest in quality, and support local makers. Stop the cycle of monthly quick fixes and think in seasons. Invest in a quality wig that's ethically sourced, or get it locally made if you can, especially now with options that are more healthy, local, and using more organic materials. This way, you can keep more money in local economies by buying from African entrepreneurs who use safer traditional ingredients, and then track your hair beauty spending for about a year to find ways to cut wasteful spending and reduce things that are too highly priced, right? And reallocate those finances in places that could improve your health and your wellness. Learn products and demand safer formulations, right? Understand ingredient lists. Avoid products with formaldehyde, non-endocrine disruptors, mercury, and unlabeled corticosteroids. Push for regulation. When consumers request safer products, retailers and governments respond. The FDA and other agencies are increasingly scrutinizing releasing ingredients in straighteners, and informing consumers about the accelerated changes that are happening in product formulations. There's also rebuilding community, rituals, and visibility. Host natural hair meetups, braid nights, crown care circles, or intergenerational storytelling events where older women teach styles and herbs that could be helpful. When people see beautiful professional examples of natural hair in workplaces, media, and leadership, the cultural logic of straight equals professional is eroded. Advocate for policy, research, and worker safety. Support research into health impacts, push for labeling and bans of the most dangerous chemicals, and advocate for salon worker protection. When they're handling chemicals, they should wear gloves. Avoid using those chemicals on your body without proper education. Have collective action leads to market change, safer products, and accountability for big brands. The evidence is growing about risk, so regulatory attention is the next step. So practice micro moves, right? Quick actionable steps, right? If you want to cut down on chemical exposure, space straightening treatments, like if you want to cut down, chemical exposure, space out the straightening treatments further apart. Use heat protective styles so that you protect your hair, and then consult a trusted stylist who knows safer alternatives. There's a lot of information online about how you can use chemicals in a way that's safe and in a way that improves your health, because not all chemicals are bad, but if you use chemicals in the wrong way, they will harm your health. So, want a low-cost pivot? Consider head wraps, protective braids, or braids that are made more organically, because there are also research papers that came out talking about how there were chemical resins in braids and wigs that were negatively impacting people's skin and hair. For me, I was reacting to braid hair. That's why braiding was not a good alternative for me. And I also learned that most people even end up washing braid hair before installing it. My niece was also negatively affected by braid hair. It was causing itching. And so I recommended that the braid hair be washed before being installed. And that helps with some of the allergic reactions people are suffering, the irritation. And also you can look at using braids that are more organic to, kind of save you from that step. Even with oils and prepackaged cosmetic products, you can use products that are more natural or more homemade to prevent or reduce those allergic reactions and save money as well. Consider joining community braiding swaps to reduce cost and injury. So for example, if you have a relative that can braid, maybe you can find a way to barter for them to braid instead of going to a commercial place that is not cost effective, that is not time effective, and that is also stressful. If you're buying a wig, check sourcing. Try to buy human hair or high quality synthetic or organic from suppliers who disclose how they process. Support African small businesses making local traceable wigs and extensions, right? In the show notes, I will have some research sources that I used to gather this data. I have, just to read them out to you, there's African Women and Spending there's an African Dreams reporting summary that we'll cite. There's also our Chang, CJ et al., use of straighteners and other hair products and incident uterine cancer, that was featured in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute in 2022. This is a National Institute of Health summary. I have the World Health Organization Africa Regional Fact Sheets on skin bleaching in Africa. I'll provide a link to that. And then there's the African population estimates that are used for illustrative numbers per woman calculation. And then the market estimates for Africa Cosmetics, Black Beauty Market Reports, the market data forecasts by Insight ACE. All of this is to say, I'm not here to shame anyone for the choices they make in regards to their appearance. I just want us to think about what influences us to make those choices when it comes to our hair and to our pockets. This conversation is not about shaming you. It's about giving women the historical context, the financial clarity, and the practical tools to choose freely, knowledgeably, and proudly how you will wear your crown, how you choose to appear in society, what makes you feel beautiful, and to self-reflect on those choices. I would love to have your feedback on this. If you have any alternatives to what I've suggested, any final thoughts or feelings you want to share, any stories that are of interest in this, please send them to us at doampodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Diva on a Mission Podcast. For now, until we are having some issues with Spotify as we evaluate their new regulations in terms of the work that we share on Spotify. So for now, you can just enjoy our old episodes on Spotify. And as soon as, but in the meantime, just enjoy our content on YouTube until we figure out the way forward with Spotify. Thank you so much for listening on this episode on Crown and Commerce. And, really reflect on what is defined as beautiful and pick the things that amplify you and that leave you feeling the best version of you, the healthiest version of you, and the most empowered version of you. Until next time, peace and locks.